Give me.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
T-Wolves cruise past the Hornets. Final score 114-93. What's going on? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves postcast episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Your team every day. Jack Borman. He's live at the Target Center. Give him a follow at JRBorman13. And Jack, plenty to break down tonight, but first, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by Game Time. Go download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. All right, man, Wolves trying to bounce back after that loss to the Spurs. That was Saturday night. They come out, they dominate, man. Up 12 at halftime, never looked back. Most of the starters were out of this one by the start of the fourth quarter. Ant 21, Randall 13, but it was Naz Reid. He was the guy. He went loco, 25 points, 5 for 7 from 3, and just overall top to bottom, a good bounce-back win for them. Kick us off, biggest knee-jerk reactions, kind of your biggest takeaways, top of your head.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway from this game, man, it doesn't look like anyone on the Charlotte Hornets enjoys playing basketball with one another. I mean, that was about as joyless of an experience as I can ever remember watching a March, April full-on tank job from an NBA team. So that was pretty clear. I think a lot of people in the building, there wasn't quite as much energy with it being an 8 o'clock tip. Obviously, no NBA games tomorrow with Election Day. So they've done this the last few years where they stagger all the starts the night before since all 30 teams are in action. And it was just kind of one of those games that just didn't have a ton of juice from the jump. And it's a good thing that the Wolves have a lot of veteran guys on this team, because this was kind of had all the makings of a Wolves team we would have seen 2 or 3 years ago really struggle and lose this type of game, just not bring the requisite energy just because the crowd doesn't have quite as much energy. But I thought that the Timberwolves infused energy into the game themselves with having what I thought was one of their better ball movement games of the year. They got out in transition a decent amount early with the with the Hornets struggling to take care of the ball and missing a lot of long threes that led to some longer rebounds and guys just getting out and running in transition, which was good. I thought Biggs did a great job with outlet passes to kickstart some of those transition opportunities. And even though the Wolves didn't necessarily score a lot on the fast break, they only had 8 fast break points. I thought that, they did a good job of getting the ball over the half court line quickly, getting into some early action. They took advantage of cross matches, especially, early on with Randall. Which was obviously a good sign for them. And number of assists and assist percentage just in general have been a good barometer. Assist percentage, again, for anyone who doesn't know, is just total, or it's the percentage of your made baskets that were assisted on. So those have both been barometers for kind of how good the offense has been this season. And in pre-garbage time, they were both really, really strong numbers for the Wolves. I want to say they had 20 assists on 30 makes before garbage time. That's a good number. And again, you probably would have more than 20 assists with the main guys if you don't get into garbage time super early. But I also thought that this was the best defensive effort of the season from the Timberwolves. LaMelo Ball has been absolutely fantastic for Charlotte to start the year. Coming in, he was averaging 30 points on 47% shooting, 40% from 3 on 12 attempts per game. So pretty much doing what Ant has been doing from 3. And averaging 6.3 assists and 5 boards. And he has been averaging 5.5 turnovers, which is obviously something that's been problematic for them. And he had 5 more tonight. But again, the Wolves did a great job of forcing him to just be a jump shooter. He had 19 points on 15 shots. It's not great. 2 of 8 from 3, and he had 2 assists to 5 turnovers. So obviously the Wolves did a great job taking LaMelo, the playmaker, out of the game. And with his size at 6'6", 6'7", has really long wingspan, super creative passer, can make just about every single pass in the book. And for them to, be able to slow him down and, kind of take him out of the game early on, I thought was really good. And the Hornets, have been good in areas that the Wolves have struggled. Yeah. They've been a really good offensive rebounding team. With them shooting a ton of threes. I think they're third in 3-point rate, right behind the Timberwolves, who are second. with nearly half of their shots being 3-pointers. So it's pretty crazy that, the Wolves allowed 10 points in the paint too in the first 6 minutes and struggled on the offensive glass early on in the game. And then, only allowed 16 points in the paint over the next 2.5 quarters. So they really did a good job of kind of adjusting on the fly, taking some of those things away and forcing Charlotte to just be a jump shooting team. And they don't have a lot of great jump shooters on this team outside of LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. So really, really strong, game for the Wolves. And anytime that you have a sub 100 defensive rating, you'll certainly take that.
Yeah, 100%. And I know you called this arguably the best ball movement game of the season for the Wolves. Like a small sample, but just something we haven't seen much of through these first 6 games, at least not on this level we got tonight. What did you see specifically in that department? And then I guess how encouraging is that for them now moving forward?
Yeah, I think, what really impressed me early on was that, the spacing with the when Gobert left the game in the first quarter was, what was it here? It was, probably around the 6:25 mark, 5-minute mark. They go on an 8-1 run right after Gobert checks out. That ballooned to 11-2 over, a 4-minute stretch there. And I just thought that the spacing, again, with the Randall Reid front court was really good. You had a lot of guys just attacking the paint, kicking the ball out, cutting when they didn't have the basketball. And that's all things that you want to see in those lineups that have Nikhil and Dante and Jaden, or excuse me, Ant, Naz and Julius. And so for those guys to really, infuse more ball movement, pace, get up some really good shots, passing up good shots for great shots, which I thought they did for the most part, is all what you want to see. And I think you have plenty of scoring in those lineups between Ant and Dante and Naz and Julius. But for them to really just kind of play agendaless basketball and share it, not really care who's scoring in those lineups, just making sure that you're getting the best possible look, I think is something that's really good when you have a bunch of unselfish guys that all really make quick decisions when the ball is flying around. I think that's obviously a good thing for your offense, and I think should help the Timberwolves be able to, build leads by the end of the first quarter, so that if you do have some stretches, at the start of the second quarter or the start of the fourth quarter, where Anthony Edwards is sitting, that you at least buy yourself a little bit of a cushion while they still figure those minutes out. But again, I've been really impressed the last few games with the Randall and Reid front court, and then how they've filled in with Na and Dante and Ant on the perimeter around those guys.
Yeah, well said. Good breakdown there. All right, plenty more deep dive from this one. We'll talk about Jaden McDaniel's slow start. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to us by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, FanDuel is giving you a chance at a huge return, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed with your first $5 wager. And with FanDuel, when you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Again, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed with your first $5 wager. Go check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get in on some NBA future action while you're there. Anthony Edwards MVP odds have moved from 15-1 down to 13-1. Still some great value. It's all sitting up over at FanDuel.com. Again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com and get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 wager. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, talk to me about Jaden McDaniels. Where's the panic meter at? I don't assume you're going to say it's very high, but, he ended up with 9 points on the night, but he was ice cold when it really, when it kind of mattered early on. Finishes 1 for 5 from 3-point range. Everything okay, I guess, in that department with Jaden? What are you seeing out there? What are you thinking with him?
Yeah, I think it's just really tough that we're really seeing Jaden struggle for long stretches of time offensively and then really put it together in pretty eye-popping fashion for these short bursts. And it's just frustrating, I guess, for fans to be able to parse out, how much of the Jaden McDaniels offensive experience is real and is something that they can further tap into versus, is that just kind of a mirage at this point? And, for Jaden, he started 0 of 7 from the floor, which was not good. In the first quarter, he started 0 for 3. All were really, ugly looking misses from 3, and then left the game early with foul trouble again. And so that's kind of been the double-edged sword, or I guess the double-edged sword, both sides being bad for Jaden, with struggling offensively and then struggling to stay on the floor because of foul trouble. And I feel like you can only really have one or the other with Jaden. It's really tough for this team, especially with what Jaden's getting paid this year. It's really tough to be able to swallow those minutes just not being super productive. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been a better player than Jaden McDaniels has so far this season. And that's not really hyperbole. That's not an overreaction. That's just how it's been thus far. And I don't think there's any reason to panic, because we've seen Jaden perform at a very high level, even in the playoffs last season, when you're going up against pretty stiff competition and you need guys to show up for several games in a row. And he certainly did that. I just think, again, it comes down to the coaching staff really finding a more consistent offensive role for him. I think without Karl on the floor, again, Karl is someone who Jaden McDaniels, if you look at his on-off numbers in, different two-man pairings last year, in the last couple of years, Jaden, the top two-man pairing guy for him has been Karl Anthony Towns. So I think that he really learned how to play off of Karl well. And I think that's probably something that he's adjusting to now, not having Karl. But again, I think the more the Wolves can try to put Jaden McDaniels in spots where he's asked to be more than just a catch and shoot guy, I think the more that you're going to be able to extract from his offensive talent that he maybe hasn't shown on a super consistent basis yet. Again, the more that you can get him in there at the start of the second quarter, the start of the fourth quarter, when Anthony Edwards is down, maybe play Mike Conley a little bit less in those spots and just ask the backcourt just to be Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Donte DiVincenzo in those minutes. And then you can get some of those Donte, Jaden, Naz, and Rudy lineups where then you really have 3 scorers on the perimeter with Donte and Jaden and Naz. I think that would be really helpful for Jaden. I just think you see the confidence again just waxing and waning. And I think a lot of that stems from him just being asked to stand in the corner too much. I think the more that you can get him, coming off of pin downs and catching the ball on the move, where he can then put the ball on the deck and either elevate in the mid range or get all the way to the rim or dump it off for Gobert or make another corner kick out pass, just kind of get him the ball on the move is really important, because he's a really flexible, really fluid, dynamic athlete, and just sticking him in the corner and asking him to corner crash for offensive rebounds and shoot threes is, has been productive in certain games, where he might have 17 points and might make, 3, 4, 5 threes, but there's just not as many of those as we'd like to see. So I think the more that you can try to activate him, the less reliant he'll be on the bench. Maybe the more you can stomach a bad Julius game or Rudy not being super involved, those types of things. But again, the Wolves are fortunate that they have probably 3 of the 10, 12 best bench players in the league on their team this season in Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. So that certainly helps make up for some.
Perfect transition. I was going to ask, talk to me about the bench right now. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how this whole thing's going to shake out 2-3 months down the road when we get closer to the thick of things, I guess, middle of the season, post All-Star break. Just start with what you're seeing out there right now. Again, small sample, 7 games in, but also what you think is the right game plan or right blueprint with the guys they got. And I guess who's sticking out the most in that department as well?
Yeah, I certainly think that Donte DiVincenzo has started to stand out the last few games with his connection with Rudy Gobert. You could tell that in those first, in the preseason a little bit, and then in the first few regular season games, there were a bit of clunky situations, right, where, you're looking at Donte like, man, why are you throwing that pass to Rudy? Rudy's not even looking for it. What are you trying to do? And I think Donte was kind of trying to extend an olive branch and just say hey, man, I want to get you involved. I know what you're capable of doing. And I know the spots where we want to try to get you the ball in the dump offs, where you kind of overdrive and then dump it back off to Gobert across the front of the rim for a dunk, or, drive, force the dropping big to commit. And that's when you throw the lob up. We've seen a lot of that. Donte, I think, had 2 more assists for Rudy dunks tonight on consecutive possessions. He had 3 against Denver, a few nights ago. So I think just to have another ball handler, a third ball handler now, that has really good synergy with Gobert, or is developing good synergy with Gobert, is really important because, again, we've seen this is now the third year that Ant's played with Rudy Gobert, and in very extended minutes. And the two of them, outside of Rudy Gobert setting awesome screens for Ant really knowing how to set up those screens and use those to his advantage as a scorer to get downhill. We just haven't seen a ton of Ant Rudy having that connection. So having another guy that's able to do that has been huge. And the way that Dante has just kind of been stuffing the stat sheet and doing, whatever it is he can to get more involved in the game. This is now the second time in 3 games that Dante has just had a super stuffed stat sheet. He had 14 points, made 3 of his 6 threes, had 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 stocks. He's been a really active defender, good playmaker, and that's just fit in really nicely behind, Dante clearly understanding that Naz is the scorer off the bench. And Naz, again, team high 25 points tonight, 9 rebounds, made 9 of his 13 shots, 5 of his 7 threes. I just think the way that those two guys play off of each other has been really fun to watch. And that's only going to become more dynamic as the season goes on and those guys find more of a rhythm, especially as shooters. But yeah, I mean, having 2 guys that could give you 25, 30 on any given night off the bench is super important. And a lot of times those guys that can give you 25 or 30 on any given night or be an excellent spot starter when, Julius misses a game or Rudy misses a game or Ant misses a game or Mike misses a game, whatever the case may be. A lot of times those players are really one-way players. They're only offensive players. They don't give you a whole lot defensively. But the fact that those 2 guys are both very competitive defenders, can guard multiple positions as well, can play multiple positions. Naz can play the 3, the 4, the 5. Dante can play the 1, the 2, the 3. That's been really, really important. And then you throw in there as a third banana, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been just tremendous as a defender, especially so far this season. I really like that Chris Finch is starting to have Nickeil defend some of those smaller, quicker guards and not asking Jaden McDaniels to do that quite as much. I think the more that you can put Jaden McDaniels on bigger guards, like LaMelo would have been a good case for that tonight if they didn't have Brandon Miller out there. Keep Jaden on those types of guys where he doesn't have to fight over screens quite as much and can just, play more even with the pick and roll game and be able to trail those slower but bigger point guards, I think is nice. And then have Nickeil be the guy that really is navigating all the screens up top and just being a really solid secondary playmaker who can, knock down 1 or 2 threes a game and, maybe, have one where defense closes out a little too hard and he's able to get all the way to the rack and finish. But,
right.
Those 3 guys are the only guys that have really played off the bench for the Wolves this season, but it's hard to necessarily argue against that when you consider, they need some more time together. This new, 2 of your top 8 guys are new, playing a little bit of a different style. So Finch hasn't gone into that bench, but again, when you've got 3 really, really strong bench players like the Timberwolves have, it's hard to argue, playing them less minutes right now.
Yeah, Naz and DiVincenzo tied for the team high tonight, plus 33 plus minus. Love to see that. 60 seconds rookie watch. Small sample, I know, but Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, both getting some late minutes the past 2 games. Encouraged at all from the small court time they've seen thus far, or any takeaways, I guess, you can share in that department?
Yeah, Rob was really productive tonight in his 8 minutes. Had 4 points, 2 assists, and I'll tell you, it was really fun being at Target Center. He got a standing ovation.
Love that.
When he got up to come to the scorer's table. The refs didn't let him in the first time. And then, everyone got back up on their feet at the next time out when Rob came in and they were going crazy every single time he touched the ball. So,
love that.
For that to happen, I thought was really cool. And it's just fun to see, the crowd have another guy that's not, potentially going to have like a Naz Reid like following, and just have another guy that this crowd's going to really adore. I think will be really fun. And, and there's inevitably going to be injuries when that does come. I think you're going to see Rob play more. But again, it's certainly going to be fun to watch his games at home, especially when he does get some longer extended run, because this crowd is really going to get behind him.
Yeah, love that. All right, couple minutes left. We'll look at the schedule. Bulls on deck. That's all coming up right after this. Quick reminder, tonight's episode also brought to us by BetterHelp, because when your schedule is packed with projects and more, it's so easy to start to let your priorities slip, even when we know what makes us happy. But when you feel like you got no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, Well, they're more important than ever. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, it's time to give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your schedule. So simple. All you got to do, you go fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Go visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Schedule coming up at Chicago. By the way, couple days of rest, which is nice. Then at Chicago, Trailblazers on a back-to-back, back at home at the Target Center. When you see that lineup, those two teams, just the top one or two things you think of most.
Yeah, I think for Chicago, it's just that they've had a fun start to the season offensively. I think when you look at what Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic and Kobe White have all been able to do, they've all been really efficient scorers. They're all scoring more than 20 points a game, shooting, all shooting at least 45% from the floor and all shooting north of 40% from three on pretty significant 3-point volume. So, Chicago has been one of the, 5-7 teams that's shooting a ton of threes this year and are shooting it at a high clip, shooting it at about 38% as a team. So, that's something certainly that you're going to have to attend to if you're the Timberwolves. They're not a team that really loves to get downhill and get to the free throw line. I think that, it's another situation like what they had tonight, where you're playing a team that's going to shoot a ton of threes, that doesn't like to get into the paint a whole lot. But Chicago certainly has more athletes than Charlotte does. So, you have to be more disciplined than the Timberwolves were tonight, closing out on shooters. And especially in the first half, the Wolves just jumped on seemingly every single pump fake that the Hornets gave and allowed them to get in the paint. They really kind of figured that out more so in the second half and prevented drivers from getting into the lane and getting easy scoring opportunities. So I think the more that you can run the Bulls off the 3-point line, especially Zach LaVine, the better you're going to be. I think the more you can force Zach LaVine to be a little bit more of a playmaker or try to finish inside over and around Rudy Gobert is probably going to be a better bet than letting him and Kobe White just shoot a ton of threes, because those guys are super talented perimeter scorers, and we've seen them light up the Timberwolves, in recent showings. So, and I think then you said Portland on Friday.
Portland on Friday. Yep.
Yeah, it's been kind of another year for Portland where it's just going to be a team that's probably in the lottery, and one of those teams that just has a pretty weird roster construction right now. And I think they're certainly trying to pick a path in terms of being bad again. But it's just weird considering that you've got two pretty solid players on huge contracts in Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton. So we'll see, if they end up getting rid of those guys, by the end of the season. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Wolves combat the size that they have with DeAndre Ayton and Donovan Clingan inside, because those are two huge guys that are certainly going to, put the Timberwolves in a bind on the offensive glass. So, it'll be interesting to see too, if Scoot Henderson is able to play better than he has so far this season. It's been a pretty inefficient start to the year for him after a pretty disappointing rookie season last year. So, we'll see. I think, again, their backcourt is extremely talented, between Scoot Henderson and Anthony Simons. Portland's a team that, again, you've got to show up and play, because they do have talent. It's just kind of weird fitting. And I think some of the lineups that they're going to trot out are going to look odd and may not flow the right way. But between Simons and Grant and Scoot and Denny Avdia, even DeAndre, they've got a lot of offensive talent that can put up points in a hurry. So, it's a game where you're going to have to come and you're going to have to, be pros and bring the energy again, because, it's a game where it might not have a ton of it. But, I think, again, we've seen them. Ant especially has gotten up for these Portland games, had some monster scoring nights against the Blazers in recent years. So we'll see if he can continue that.
Yeah, some fun memories with Ant specifically in these Portland games. And I'll tell you what, we're going to get to know this Portland team and Scoot and all these guys pretty well because they play Portland 3 of their next 5 games. All right, great stuff, man. As always, Wolves dominate tonight from start to finish. They move to 4-3 on the season now. Final score versus Charlotte, 114-93. Hey, as always, huge shout out to all the everydayers out there that always make us your first listen. We're going to be doing these postcasts all season long, so make sure you like, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you follow all of Jack's work on X. It's at JRBorman13. He's live at the Target Center tonight, as always. Wolves Chicago up next. We'll catch you next time, but until then, signing out.